From the big league losing their biggest heavyweight to their rivals, to the promotion rooting for fighter advocacy, here's why the UFC hates the PFL. For starters, there is one name that really rubs Dana White the wrong way. It's Francis Ngannou. That's right, this is the man who'll forever be known as the only guy who snubbed the UFC system, only to sign for the fastest-growing MMA promotion in the world. But it wasn't that he left for the UFC's competitor, it was the way he left that will go down in the history books. For years, fighters were complaining about how unfair their contracts were, but they had no choice and succumbed to the pressures of the world's biggest MMA promotion. But Ngannou, on the other hand, he was having none of it. After months of rigorous negotiation, news broke that Ngannou had officially left the promotion, and according to Dana, he's never to return again. For people who think Francis is all about the money, think again. He snubbed a contract that would have made him the highest paid heavyweight that has ever stepped into the UFC. It wasn't about that at all. It was about something much, much bigger. Freedom. No matter how much money was in that contract, Ngannou did not consider himself a free man. Why? First off, the UFC is very restricted with their sponsorship policies. Fighters can't endorse their own brand deals on the platform. This poses a major problem because fighters are quite literally going broke with their salaried contracts in the UFC. Shout out to Jared Cannonier, a very renowned name in the middleweight division. Well, he's on the prowl once again, not because he wants all the heat or he's just bored. He wants to fight out of necessity. In a heartbreaking post-fight interview, Jared vented out how he's looking for an opponent because he's broke. This is something you don't expect to hear from someone of Jared's stature, and considering he spoke after an emphatic victory against Kelvin Gastelum. The world wanted to hear from Jared, and hence the MMA Hour invited him over for an interview, where the middleweight spilled the beans. He revealed that after the Gastelum won, 60% of his earnings were already gone. People don't really understand how much goes into the training camp. Cannonier revealed how his purse was split between the gym, management, bills, credit cards, taxes, car payments, the works. Money doesn't last forever, but it just makes you think, this isn't even a fighter under loads of debt or a minor name in the division. And yet he's struggling, all while Dana is out here flexing his crib in Las Vegas, worth $1.65 million. Honestly, Dana can do whatever he wants with his money, but boy does he get touchy when people approach him about fighter pay. Throwback to the time, the Prez straight up said, raising fighter pay is never gonna happen as long as he's there. Well, if you won't fix your shit, it's only a matter of time before a bigger promotion will take your place. Oh wait, it already has. Enter the Professional Fighter League. If you're not aware of what the PFL is, let's have their head of fighter advocacy teach us. The problem child announced his entry into the league on his YouTube, and boy, did he give us a lot to talk about. Every minute of that video, it was a jab at the UFC. Jake started off his announcement by claiming that the PFL is the fastest growing sports league in the world. And if you look at the numbers, you can't deny it. The PFL has seen a whopping 40% viewership from the United States, with 8 million people watching through the first 5 weeks of 2023, 25 million engagement, and 198 million video views on their videos. That's absolutely insane. Sure, when you think of MMA in the US, you think of UFC, but it looks like it's only a matter of time before they get dethroned. And for starters, they seem like they actually give a about their fighters. Jake, in that video, dropped a major bomb for Dana White, where on one hand, the UFC prez is stingy as about increasing salaries. The PFL, well, they're willing to give fighters 50% of the total pay-per-view revenue. Finally, it just makes sense. The fighters make up the promotion, they put their lives on the line, leave their families just to put bread on the table. Guess Peter Murray and his company is very professional about this issue. And besides the logistics, don't even get me started on the roster. We're talking former UFC lightweight champion Anthony Pettis, former Olympic and judo world champion Kayla Harrison, and UFC legend Rory McDonald. I think you can tell a pattern with these fighters. Besides being incredibly talented, they're all from the UFC. This is a major slap in the face for the UFC and Dana White, considering these names are not only the best, but the highest paid fighters in the PFL. Cedric Doumbé, a French kickboxing phenomenon, has finally found a contract for himself that he's genuinely happy with, and he was very vocal about it. Speaking on the MMA Hour, Doumbé said, that has a better contract with the PFL, which is 10 times bigger than the UFC. The details of the agreement are very telling of everything wrong with the UFC, where once he was making a measly $20,000 just to show up, the French brawler will be stacking up $140,000 per fight. But the big question, how much did the Ngannou's freedom actually cost? Well, PFL's cover boy will apparently be making a high seven figures, and will also have the opportunity to display his own sponsors inside the smart cage. Which brings us to another reason why the UFC hates the PFL. Apparently, the PFL will grant each fighter the right to sell up to 2 sponsors to receive logo placement on their attire. This gives the fighters a chance to make some extra dough on the side, alongside their actual purse. Not only that, someone tell Dana that allowing sponsors only boosts the credibility of the promotion and brings in heaps of revenue. I mean, look at the sport of boxing. It's stacked with logos, which explains how fighters like Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, and Floyd Mayweather are making millions on their fights. You see, besides all the money, the biggest difference between is that the PFL seem like they actually give a about the sport of MMA. For starters, let's look at Jake Paul. Say what you will about the problem child. He makes sure he fights for fighter rights. He's done wonders for charity. And using his voice and credibility in boxing to do good for society, the PFL saw that. And lo and behold, we have the new head of fighter advocacy. His job? To market PFL fighters and introduce them to his fans worldwide. This is a genius plan, you see. There is a curse in the sport of MMA, which is prevalent in the UFC. Ideally, the best fighter should make the most money, right? Wrong, where most fighters fall short is their ability to market themselves and put themselves out there. This is one of the reasons why McGregor is still the UFC's cover boy, even after his abysmal performances in the past. Jake will be using his influence and a fan base worth 20 million plus to bring some of the worst mother truckers in the sport to the limelight. This is why people are loving the PFL. Heck, they even went ahead and made Francis Ngannou the chairman of PFL Africa. And lastly, let's talk about the rules, which is personally my favorite part about the PFL. Unlike the UFC, PFL's events don't feel like cash grabs that revolve throughout the year. They are structured in seasons. You can think of it as a league-style format. Each fighter earns points based on the results of their bouts. The top 4 fighters with the most points per division will enter the playoff stages and then the championship stages. Seriously, it's like a breath of fresh air. And most importantly, it's fair. It leaves no room for debate and ridiculous matchmaking. The structure is plain and simple. The better fighter advances, regardless of whether they can talk trash for 20 minutes on the microphone. Not only that, gone are the contractual disputes and ducking when it comes to making fights happen. PFL's system ensures the best fighters will fight the best fighters, period. It's so much more mature. UFC fans may argue that their favorite promotion has super fights. Well, the PFL, it literally has its own league, dedicated to super fights only. Dana can be as salty as he wants, saying Ngannou went to the PFL, taking 0 risks, but bet he's losing sleep at the fastest growing MMA promotion of all time. So, from the promotion rooting for fighter advocacy to the UFC losing their biggest heavyweight to their rivals, that's why the UFC hates the PFL.